Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth, and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the President, petitions, papers.
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers listed on the other paper in the name of the Minister of Health. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Health to the 6th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, 3rd Session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the impact on mental health and family life of remandees at the remand prisons. I thank you.
Questions?
Senator Mark.
Thank you. To the Honorable Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, has the government verified reports that a female national has been sentenced to death by an Iraqi court for her association with the Islamic State?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to advise that the government is not currently in a position to provide any additional comment on this issue. However, the government has in fact reached out to international partners to verify the veracity of such reports, and we await such information, Madam President.
Senator Mark.
Could the Honorable Minister inform this House when can the Senate and the country be in a position to secure a definitive position on this matter based on communications from our international partners?
Minister.
Madam President, one cannot set a time limit on that. It's all based on the information coming from our international partners to whom we have made such requests.
Senator Mark.
Is the Minister aware from his knowledge that any Trinidadians and Tobagonians are in Iraq under the sentence of death? Are you aware of any information to that effect as the Minister of National Security?
Minister.
Madam President, I have no such information.
Next question, Senator Mark.
To the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, having regard to the recent High Court ruling indicating that the Minister of National Security acted illegally in removing the former SSA director in November of 2015, what immediate steps are being taken to correct the actions of the minister?
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, based on the information and advice I have before me, the assertion in the question in relation to the ruling of the High Court is manifestly incorrect, and as such, no steps have been taken to correct the action that has been indicated in the question.
Senator Ramdeen.
Madam President, Madam President, through you to the Honourable Leader of Government Business. Having regard to the ruling of the High Court in this matter, what steps have been or are being taken to preserve intelligence, surveillance, or other information that would have been gathered during the period that the court has declared that the SSA was illegally without a director?
Madam President, I'm advised by the Honourable Attorney General that he sought the advice of senior counsel. This is a very recent decision of the court rendered on the 16th of April 2018, and the Attorney General is awaiting that advice.
Senator Ramdeen.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, through you to the Honourable Leader of Government Business, what steps, Minister, have been taken at the SSA to ensure that what transpired in November of 2015 that led to this High Court action being commenced and the challenge in this case does not reoccur at any time in the future?
Minister.
Madam President, as I've said, this is a decision rendered this week by the High Court. The Attorney General has sought the advice of senior counsel on the implications of the decision, and that information is not available at this time.
Next question, Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. To the Honourable Minister of National Security, in light of the concerns expressed by the Police, Social and Welfare Association about an impending collapse of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service owing to the absence of promotions, what steps are being taken to avoid such collapse?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the Commissioner of Police has advised that there is no impending collapse of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service due to the absence of promotions in the First Division. However, there has been an unacceptable long delay in promotions, which is being addressed notwithstanding the negative bureaucratic process that has to be followed to effect these promotions. Madam President, since 2016, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has been pursuing the contracting of a firm to design and implement a promotional assessment process to fill vacancies in the First Division of the Police Service. This is required by virtue of the Police Service Act and regulations. The process requires the engagement of the Central Tenders Board. In 2017, Miami-Dade College was selected and notified that it was to be awarded the contract for the assessment process. However, extensive negotiations to finalize the contract between the Miami-Dade College and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, under the guidance of the Chief State Solicitor Department, ensued from September 2017 to December 2017, without the parties reaching an agreement on the clauses of the contract. As a consequence, the Commissioner of Police wrote the Central Tenders Board to have the award of contract to Miami-Dade College rescinded so that the process can move forward to effectively have another company provide the assessment services. He's at present awaiting the authorization of the Central Tenders Board on this matter, Madam President.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, could the Honourable Minister indicate in the interregnum what impact the absence of promotions over the last few years is having on the morale of members of the police service?
Senator Mark, that question doesn't arise.
Well,
Next.
could I ask another one?
Yes, you have another one you can ask.
Could I ask the Honourable Minister, is there a time frame, Madam President, for the engagement of firm number 2 in an effort to speed up the assessment process that would facilitate this long outstanding promotional matter?
Minister of National Security.
Madam President, the Commissioner of Police is awaiting the Central Tenders Board, and I have no time with respect to what timeline the Central Tenders Board has placed on that process.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Acting Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, the government intends to answer all of the questions for oral answer with the exception of question number 110, and question number 111. And we're asking for a deferral of 2 weeks on those two questions. Madam President, just to remind you, you may recall...
no need about questions.
64, yeah.
Questions 110 and 111 are deferred for 2 weeks. Senator Mark.
Thank you. Question number 82 to the Honorable Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President, in my capacity as Acting Minister of Housing for the time being. The answer to question 82. The number of clients for the named housing developments currently in arrears are as follows. At the East Grove development, there are 56 persons in arrears. At the Oasis housing development, there are 132 persons in arrears. At the Eden Gardens housing development, 18 persons in arrears. At the Cashew Gardens housing development, 146 persons in arrears. The Housing Development Corporation has increased its internal resources, dedicated to the recovery of arrears, and participated in several continuing collection exercises, using both external and increased internal personnel to reduce the volume of arrears outstanding. In particular, internal staff routinely visit the clients with delinquent accounts and invite them to visit the offices of the HDC to pay outstanding balances or arrange for the implementation of a payment plan. The corporation has also engaged Debt Recovery and Administrative Services Limited and AV Knowles debt collection agencies to assist in its collection efforts.
Senator Mark.
Thank you. Could the Honorable Minister, Acting Prime Minister, could the Honorable Acting Prime Minister indicate, Madam President, if he's in a position at this time to provide this House with the total value of outstanding arrears in dollars and cents owed to the HDC at this material time?
To the HDC, Senator Mark, or in respect of these?
In respect of these areas, rather.
Minister?
Unfortunately not. If the Honourable Senator will pose the question, we would certainly answer it.
Senator Mark.
Yeah, Madam President, could the Honourable Minister indicate what are the specific steps and how, well, I should put it another way, how successful thus far have been the various efforts aimed at recovering these outstanding arrears in the areas identified, Madam President?
Acting Prime Minister.
Madam President, that too, do not have the detailed particulars. If that question is asked, we will answer it.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, may I ask the Honourable Minister through you whether the government has any intention to consider writing off these outstanding loans and debt owed to the HDC in these areas, having regard to the state of this economy and the plight of maybe many homeowners at this time?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. It should be self-evident from the answer that the answer is no, not at this time, since we have engaged collection agencies to try and collect the debts.
Senator Mark.
And hence I ask, Madam President, seeing that we have appointed a number of agencies to collect these outstanding debts, can the Minister indicate to us how successful have these agencies been thus far?
Senator Mark, but that is you've repeated that question, and the Acting Prime Minister has answered. So you've just used up your 4 supplementary questions.
I seek your protection from this.
Senator Mark, next question.
I think he's the acting Prime Minister.
Senator Mark, next question,
More
please.
manners here. No, you can't tell me to move along. Out of place.
Senator Mark, if only you would look at me and take my direction. Next question, please.
I need a hearing aid, Madam President, to avoid this gentleman. Madam President, may I, through you, may I, through you, Madam President, pose question number 83 to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Madam President.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I thank my colleague, Senator Mark, for this question. Madam President, the Housing Development Corporation's proposed development in that area is called the North Grove Housing Development and not the East Grove Housing Development. As it relates to parts 1 and 2 of the question, evaluation of the land has not been done and no value has been placed on the land at this time. Whereas a fixed value of $5 per square foot is ascribed to state land used to construct individual public housing units, it is not the normal practice for evaluation to be done of state land that is intended to be used for the construction of apartment buildings to provide housing units for sale or rental to the public. With regard to part 3 of the question, Madam President, sections of the land is currently under tree crop cultivation. Significant portions of the land are abandoned and covered in bush. With regard to part 4 of the question, soil classification studies conducted decades ago list the soil in that area as Class 1 soil. That also includes land, Madam President, now occupied by the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, various state buildings, and squatters in the area. Finally, Madam President, as it relates to part 6 of the question, the last soil test carried out in that area was in 2013.
President, may I?
Yes.
Could the Honourable Minister indicate when the last soil test was carried out in 2013? What was the class of the soil at that material time?
Madam President, as I indicated, the soil tests conducted decades ago listed as Class 1 soils, and nothing that happened in 2013 changed that classification.
So, in light of the fact that we still have Class 1 soil in this particular area of the country, can the Minister indicate to us whether the government intends to pursue its housing construction program on Class 1 soil, which, as you know, is a rarity in our country?
Minister.
Madam President, it will take me a long time to deal with the issue of rarity. In allocating land for development purposes and public use, there are various factors to be considered. And in fact, the rating of or classification of soil is just one factor in terms of the use of the soil, particularly for agricultural use. So the government, having examined the availability of land and examined a number of factors relating to its housing development program, has settled on this particular site, particularly having regard to its condition and the fact that it's not been used in a sustainable way, and the government is satisfied that it is the decision to be made in line with its housing program. Thank you.
Could the Honourable Minister indicate what portion of this land is under tree crop production at this material time?
Minister.
Madam President, we're dealing here with a 200-acre parcel of land, bounded on the west by Wassa, on the west by the river, on the north by Wassa, on the east by the Southern Main Road, and on the south by East Grove Housing Development. It's a large site. It's very difficult to determine, but I would say, in fairness to my friend, that it's not more than 10 acres that are used for tree crop cultivation, and this is across the 200-acre site.
Senator Mark.
Can you indicate to this Honorable House whether it is the government's policy to erode through housing construction Class A or Class 1 soil? Well, in other words, utilize Class 1 soil for purposes, Madam President, of housing construction at a time when agriculture is so critical and vital for food security for our nation.
Minister.
Madam President, I thought that my colleague would have been extremely familiar with the way this works. This soil is no different from the Pineapple Smith lands in Mausica that were bulldozed by the UNC and ended up in court. This soil is no different from the soil upon which Oasis Housing Development in Edinburgh, Endeavour Road was developed. And as I said before, the classification of the soil may be a factor, but it is one factor. And the government has made its decision in relation to its housing development program.
No. Oh. Yes. Next question, Senator Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Housing, question rather, number 84 to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. Response to question 84. The units at Oasis, Eden Gardens, and Cashew Gardens housing developments were all completed prior to September 2015. The number of units renovated and distributed in these areas were Oasis, 187 units renovated, 204 units distributed. Eden Gardens, 1 unit renovated, 60 units completed, 58 units distributed. Cashew Gardens, 40 units renovated, 48 units completed, 18 units distributed. With respect to Cashew Gardens in particular, while only 18 units were distributed during the period September 2015 to January 31st, 2018, which is the period in the question, since then, the remaining units have been distributed.
Senator Mark.
Madam President, can the Honourable Minister advise whether in the 3 areas identified, particularly in Oasis, is there need for a continued program of renovation for units constructed at this particular site?
Senator Mark, that question doesn't arise.
Does not arise, okay.
Next question, Senator Mark.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Senator Hussain, next question.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Question 109 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the National Crime Prevention Program, referred to as the NCPP, is one of government's strategic responses to the challenges facing the country in terms of the fear of crime, criminality, and social disorder. The National Crime Prevention Program Secretariat commenced its operation in August 2017 and currently has a staff of 7, including a manager who oversees its operations. Since its establishment, the NCPP Secretariat has achieved several of its core activities. These include drafted terms of reference for the operations of the NCPP, community liaison officers, community crime prevention councils, and interministerial committee. They've conducted strategic planning sessions in the municipalities of Diego Martin and Sogonas, which are aimed at establishing community crime prevention councils in the 2 municipalities and Tobago in the first phase of its implementation. We have drafted a comprehensive project document, including a communication and education strategy, established an administrative framework, and a management plan for stakeholder engagement. We also invited applications for the position of community liaison officers for the various municipalities. Suitable applicants have been shortlisted and interviews are to be scheduled shortly. We also conducted stakeholder meetings with the chairmen, mayors, and CEOs of all municipalities. Further public sessions have been scheduled with key stakeholders in Diego Martin, Sogonas, and Tobago. These sessions will facilitate the development of appropriate plans, projects, and programs. Madam President, implementation of the program will occur on a phased basis. The initial phase will be in Sogonas, Diego Martin, and Tobago. Strategic planning sessions have been held with all 3 executive councils and a community crime prevention councils to be established in both municipalities and Tobago. Evaluation of this program will be undertaken in 3 months thereafter, and thereafter the program will be implemented in the other 12 municipalities. Due to the multifaceted and multidimensional approach required to address crime prevention, a comprehensive training program has been developed and will be executed over the period April 23rd to July 13, 2018. This program consists of workshops which will be divided into separate 2-day sessions, will include participants to the concept of crime prevention with an evidence-based approach and is targeted towards stakeholders who will operate in a crime prevention capacity in their respective responsibilities. Madam President.
Senator Hussain.
In light of the answer given by the Minister with regard to the terms of reference of the NCPP, which is the National Crime Prevention Program, can the Minister give the Senate the terms of reference of the program, please?
Minister.
Madam President, that can be forwarded. I don't have it on me right now, but it certainly can be made available because they are public documents.
Senator Hussain.
Thank you very much, Madam President. With respect to the answer also given, where the Minister indicated that community liaison officers were actually engaged in the program, can the Minister state whether or not these positions were advertised?
Minister.
Madam President, yes, they were advertised, and it's based on cooperation between the municipalities and us that these were, applicants were received.
Senator.
Having regard to the high levels of crime in the Port of Spain area and also in the municipality of Sawa Lavental, can the Minister indicate why the program was not initiated in these municipalities first?
Madam President, the program targets all municipalities and Tobago. The time the decision was made to choose Chaguanas and Diego Martin was based on, at that time, the sort of security environment that existed in those 2 municipalities. By the end, all municipalities will be addressed because the program addresses all municipalities and Tobago.
Senator. Next question, Senator Obika.
Madam President, question 112 to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. The Housing Development Corporation has been advised that 2 additional families were affected by the landslide in Bamboo Village, Cedros. The cases of both families are being assessed by the HTC to determine if their cases warrant emergency housing accommodation, following which the HTC will provide housing in a similar manner to those families who have already been temporarily relocated. The Aided Self-Help Program, a recently launched initiative by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, aims to empower persons to manage the construction of their own homes with financial and technical support of the state. The HCC is working alongside the parliamentary representative for the area, the Honorable Edmund Dillon, who has been in discussions with non-governmental organizations, such as Habitat for Humanity, who agreed to provide financial support through corporate sponsorship upon location of any available lands by the HCC in the Cedros area to assist the families in rebuilding their homes. The Ministry's initial involvement in providing assistance to the affected residents of Bamboo Village, Cedros, was the provision of temporary emergency housing. It was subsequently determined during the assessment of the housing needs of the residents that all of the residents preferred to remain in the Cedros area. Therefore, the option of permanent housing in Lakeview Point 14 is not applicable. Further, subsequent to the placement of the families in temporary housing units, the residents requested assistance to rebuild their homes, and the HCC is currently in the process of exploring alternative housing accommodation through various agencies, both non-governmental and state agencies.
Taubika.
Madam President, the Acting Prime Minister made reference to an assessment. How long are the residents expected to wait for this assessment to arrive at its final conclusion, given that February was when the calamity occurred?
Acting Prime Minister.
Madam President, I don't have that information, but this relates to 2 additional families whose situation became known after the event. I will see that it can be expedited. I can't tell you exactly when. I'll try my best to make sure it's expedited.
Senator Ramdeen.
Thank you, Madam President. To the Honorable Acting Prime Minister. How has the government, through the HDC, engaged any of the private landowners in that area where this calamity has taken place, so that they may access lands that are available closer to where these persons live, in order to provide them with accommodation and even lands to rebuild their homes in case the plans that the Prime Minister has indicated from Habitat Humanity are made available?
Prime Minister.
Madam President, I can't specifically answer that question, but a search is ongoing for land. I would think that if no state land is available, then the option of private lands will have to be considered.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Could the Acting Prime Minister indicate what if the persons would have to finance their own construction of the houses, as he mentioned, that they may find lands, but would they have to finance the construction of their own new homes?
Acting Prime Minister.
Madam President, I thought I answered that, but I'll just repeat. The Aided Self-Help Program provides financial and technical support from the state, so it provides a level of financial support. Habitat for Humanity also provides financial support. So those are the 2 programs that are being considered at this point in time. Assistance through the Aided Self-Help Program, which provides a level of finance, and assistance through Habitat for Humanity, which also provides a level of finance.
Senator Obika.
President, could the Acting Prime Minister indicate what % of the final household home construction figure the families would have to bear?
Acting Prime Minister.
No, I can't tell you that at this point in time, but I will endeavor to determine the information, and that can be provided.
Senator Obika, any more questions? Next question, Senator Obika.
Question number 113 to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't know if there was a typo in the question, but the landslide in question is not a national disaster. It cannot be, since it is a localized incident and affects just 10 houses. However, landslides are generally classified as natural disasters as opposed to national disasters. In this context, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management is normally the first point of contact in the event of any natural disaster in Trinidad and Tobago. When a natural disaster occurs, such as a landslide, the ODPM refers such cases to the Disaster Management Unit, who then assigns field officers to conduct site assessments. Following the reports on these visits, the ODPM partners with representatives from agencies such as the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and the National Commission for Self-Help, among others, to provide relief.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Could the Acting Prime Minister indicate if, given these measures, any psychosocial support is being rendered to the persons as they... Thank you.
Acting Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, since that was not part of the question, I don't have those details, but I do know that the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services does provide counseling and other forms of psychosocial support.
Senator Obika.
Madam President, the question was in the spirit of the fact that these persons would have lost everything, and if there is anything above and beyond what the Acting Prime Minister mentioned as the run-of-the-mill measures Is there anything above and beyond it, given the peculiar circumstances of the persons in Bamboo Village?
Senator Obika, that question doesn't arise.
Cannot.
Senator Mark?
Can I ask the Honorable Acting Prime Minister whether the government has established a special fund for addressing natural disasters, given their frequent occurrences in this part of the region, and more so Trinidad and Tobago? Is there a special fund that has been established?
Acting Prime Minister.
Madam President, there is no special fund. However, Trinidad and Tobago, under this government, has taken out catastrophe insurance, which only last year resulted in a payment to Trinidad and Tobago of some $50 million from the Caribbean Catastrophe Insurance Facility to attend to victims of flooding. So whereas there's no special fund, there is a catastrophe insurance policy in place.
Senator Mark?
Can I ask the Honorable Acting Prime Minister, in light of this natural disaster that has occurred in Cedros and the subsequent erosion of the coastal areas of that particular part of the country, can the Honorable Acting Prime Minister indicate whether attempts are being made to address the erosion of the coastal region or areas of that part of the country?
Senator Mark, that question does not arise. Next question, Senator Obika.
Madam President, question number 114 to the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Madam President, the simple answer is yes. The San Fernando City Corporation has plans to charge persons for the use of the corporation's car park on Lady Hills Avenue near the entrance to the General Hospital for the purpose of providing additional revenue for the corporation. Madam President, the San Fernando City Corporation was given permission and full responsibility to construct and utilize the car park by the Public Transport Service Corporation, PTSC. In March 2018, the corporation took the decision to lease out the car park to be operated and managed privately at a monthly rate of $10,000 for an initial period of 3 months commencing April 2018. Upon the expiration of this period of lease, the contract will be evaluated to determine whether or not the arrangement should be continued or a new arrangement implemented. The corporation currently has 2 other open spaces leased out for parking under similar arrangements. Thank you.
Senator Obika.
Thank you, Madam President. Could the Honorable Minister indicate if, in introducing this fee, the plight of the persons using the water taxi for which the car park services would be adversely affected because they now have additional fees for parking?
Minister.
Madam President, I don't understand the use of the word plight. Certainly the users of the water taxi and any other member of the public would be able to enjoy the convenience of parking at the corporation's car park and pay the requisite fee to the corporation because the corporation, as I said before, wishes to generate revenue for the purpose of upkeeping the car parks and for other issues.
Senator Obika.
Madam President, could the Honorable Minister indicate how much revenue, given that the car park is to raise revenue for the corporation, this measure should bring?
Minister.
Madam President, as previously indicated, the corporation has entered into a 3-month arrangement commencing April 2018. Upon expiration of the 3-month period, the corporation will evaluate the arrangement, including the revenue generated from the arrangement, and determine the feasibility of the arrangement or other issues relating to the arrangement.
Senator Obika.
Madam President, could the Minister indicate whether or not consultation with users of the water taxi for whom the car parking facility accommodates was conducted? Were the users of the water taxi consulted before deciding to introduce a fee for the car park?
Minister.
Madam President, as previously indicated, this arrangement is for a 3-month period, and at the end of the 3-month period, the corporation will evaluate the feasibility of the arrangements entered into. I may add, Madam President, the impossibility of consulting with this unknown group called the users of the water taxi, but that may encompass anybody anywhere in the world.
Madam President, then can the Minister confirm that no consultation was conducted with the users of the water taxi regarding introduction of this fee for the car park that they currently enjoy free of charge?
Senator Obike, I won't allow that question.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honourable Senators, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Valuation of Land Act, Chapter 5803, which was in progress when the Senate adjourned on Tuesday, April the 17th, 2018, will be resumed. On said date, Tuesday, the 17th of April, 2018, some 18 senators, including the mover of the motion, contributed to the debate. I now invite the Minister in the Ministry of Finance to continue her contribution. You have 43 minutes of speaking time.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, predictably, quite a bit of the discussion on Tuesday centered around issues that really arise under the Property Tax Act rather than the Valuation of Land Act, understandably because they're so interwoven, which is why we were hoping to debate them together, but that was not to be. So what I propose to do, Madam President, unless I get instructions otherwise from you, is to focus more specifically on the issues dealing with the Valuation of Property Amendment Bill, and in my presentation in respect of the Property Tax Bill, I will deal with the other matters that are peculiar to that bill. So, Madam President, in reviewing the comments and questions raised on the last occasion, I have categorize them into 4 areas. That would be the basis of the valuation of the property, the fine that is being amended, the establishment of the tribunal, and the suffering that is going to be brought to bear on the poor and downtrodden in Trinidad and Tobago. So I will address my responses in those categories. Madam President, Senator Shirky-Soon was the one who spent the most time dealing with the methodology of the valuation, asking which one were we going to use and whether we needed to amend the de minimis rule to impact on each of the methods and those kinds of things. What I would like to make it clear to Senator Shirky-Soon through you, Madam President, and the rest of the national community is that land and building taxes in respect of all property in Trinidad and Tobago will be based on the annual rateable value of that property. The valuation division will seek to determine the annual rateable value, starting with comparisons based on similar properties and those kinds of things, where it is not able to directly get to an annual rateable value. It will have the leeway of going through or backing into the annual rateable value using the capital method, the site value method. But ultimately, the objective is to arrive at the annual rateable value of each property, so that there is no need to create a de minimis rule with respect to a capital value or a site value, because in terms of computing a tax liability, those will not be relevant. Valuation is an inexact science, so even if we spelled out exactly what they were going to do, there is no way that anybody, even a qualified valuator, could say with any degree of certainty what rental value will be arrived at by the Commissioner of Valuations. They will have a guide as to what will happen, but what we really do need to do, Madam President, is to get on with the business of the legislation, start preparing the valuations and circulating it to the members of the public so they will get some degree of comfort that the valuations are not ridiculous and therefore the tax will not be ridiculous. I am fairly comfortable, based on the long history of the operation of the Land and Building Taxes Act, that the annual rental values that will be arrived at will not be unreasonable, but we cannot tell that for certain until we actually see them. So through you, Madam President, to Senator Shweki soon, I wish I could give you and the national community more comfort on that issue at this point, but as I said, we can only get that as and when we start seeing the values. Madam President, a lot was made of the fact that the fine for failure to file a return and failure to willfully file a return and to willfully omit information from, or misstate information in that return, that we were seeking to increase the fine from $500 to $5,000. The main reason for imposing a fine is to act as a deterrent for people to not flout the legislation. If the fine is too minimal, that deterrent factor will be absent. When we look at the old legislation, which was introduced in 1920, the fine for the identical offense was $400. A century later, having a fine of $500, you must acknowledge that there is no way that can act as a deterrent. Not in a country where Trinidadian and Tobagonians are prepared to pay $1,500 to go to a carnival fete and pay $10,000 for a carnival costume. $500 is not a deterrent. So I am not saying by any means that $500 is not a significant amount of money, and there's a lot of us can do with it, but it certainly is not the kind of deterrent that we need to ensure that people comply with their responsibilities under the legislation. This is the reason why we are seeking to adjust the fine from $500 to $5,000. There are some senators, and I agree with them, who say that for some $5,000 is not enough of a deterrent. But we have to get a middle point where we don't overburden the people who, to $5,000, that is a significant amount. So we have arrived at an amount that we find is reasonable, that hopefully will act as something of a deterrent. The tribunal. I think the sense we got was that most people were in favor of the tribunal. It avoids the incurrence of legal fees. It gives you a more informal setting to try to deal with your disputes on valuation. It avoids the backlog, the significant backlog at the Tax Appeal Board. It creates a specialist area, so hopefully we can get matters dealt with expeditiously. So we appear to be on the same page with that. The concern that was raised with respect to the tribunal by the vast majority of members on the other side had to do with who appoints the members of the tribunal. The reason why the government didn't think that the appointment of the tribunal by the minister was that detrimental was that the tribunal doesn't interfere with any of the existing appeal rights. You still have the right to go to the court of first instance. You still have the right to appeal to the Court of Appeal. You still have the right to appeal to the Privy Council. The tribunal is not seeking to replace any of those levels. And it is really intended to act as a more informal alternative dispute resolution type of avenue for resolution of these matters, with specialists and valuations there so that they can lend their expertise in assisting with resolving issues between the landowner and the Valuation Commission. However, being the reasonable government that we are, we heard you all and we are prepared to suggest an amendment when we get to that stage. Senator Crease, on the issue of the valuation, Madam President, raised concerns regarding the level of qualification of the members and urged us to increase that. And my response to Senator Crease is that the levels outlined in the Act are the minimum standards that will be required. And what the intention will be to pull together the best tribunal that we can, but we don't want to restrict ourselves and make it impossible to get a tribunal. So we've put a reasonable minimum level, and we, as I said, we will seek to get the best tribunal who can give justice to that new method of resolution of matters. So that is how we propose to address that issue, Senator. Madam President, a lot of the issues under the last category, which I refer to as the suffering of the poor comments, really have to do with the Property Tax Act, and a lot of them I will address, as I said, in that context. But there are certain specific issues that I would like to address now. Senator Mahavia asked if the fact that we have defined condominiums and townhouses as representing land means that they will pay a lower rate of tax because they are categorized as land. And Senator Mahabia, that really will not arise because when we get to the Property Tax Act, you will see that we are moving away from the system where there's a rate of tax on land and a different rate of tax on buildings. There is one rate of tax that applies to the property as enhanced by buildings. So what the amendment that defines a condo as a building really does is that it allows the Board of Inland Revenue to assess and collect tax from each individual owner in a multi-dwelling compound. That is what it does. It doesn't give them the advantage of paying tax at a lower rate. That is not the intention at all. Senator Obika raised an example of a retiree, destitute, but living in a 10-bedroom house with an annual rate of value of $120,000, how she would be set upon and she will lose her house because she would be made to suffer. I would like to advise Senator Obika, through you, Madam President, that somebody living in a house, the rental value of which is $120,000, will have an annual, not monthly, an annual tax liability of $3,600. In my view, and you may think that I'm unreasonable and insensitive, in my view, a $3,600 annual property tax charge is not unreasonable. Over and above that, there is a provision in the legislation to provide relief to anybody who cannot afford to pay their tax liability, which I will deal with more fully when I get to that legislation. So I don't think that the old lady with her 10-bedroom house will have too much of a problem. I think my colleague, leader of government business, adequately dealt with Senator Obik's concerns about providing your land deed number, so I won't deal with that again. Definition of persons who hold certificates but are not owners. Yes, the intention is, this is a question from Senator Bale as well, the intention is that anybody who falls with the definition of owner, whether you're a legal owner or you're an occupier, will have a tax liability. And it does not matter that you are not the legal owner of the land. It doesn't matter that you may be a squatter. As somebody occupying property, you are also enjoying the benefits provided by services of the regional councils and of the state. And why should you, because you are illegally perhaps occupying land, or because you're occupying land under a less than perfect title, why should you not contribute to payment for those services? And so that is the government's position. So we are intending to assess properties like that to tax and to collect taxes from people in that area. And I will also deal with that when I come to the property tax legislation.
I just want to ask the Minister, how does that have an impact on people's entitlement or their rights, squatter rights, where it regards the land assessment and taxation for squatters in particular, those who have certificates of comfort and those who don't?
I will deal with that in the property tax debate, yes? Senator Amin raised the issue of the applicability of the increased fines to people like herself who have not submitted, and I hope what she meant was she has not yet submitted her return form. And what I will say to you is that the fine only applies where you fail to submit a form that you're required to submit. Up to now, people have been requested to submit forms voluntarily. They're not yet required to submit forms, and therefore the fine does not yet kick in. Yes, we do intend, Madam President, to address the issue of education. There was, I readily acknowledge that the education program on the last occasion was inadequate. That was significantly due to the fact, as I said when I started the debate, that there was a lot of uncertainty regarding the areas of responsibility of the two agencies involved, the Valuation Division versus the Board of Inland Revenue. In my view, we have significantly clarified that, and we will ensure that we learn from that exercise and ensure that not only do we have a better education campaign going forward, but that we also have people properly available to assist persons who have questions and who need help with filling out the form. And Senator Small, I will also give you the assurance that we have had finite dates within which somebody must object to a matter for ages in all our tax bills. And yes, we acknowledge that there may be a difficulty with receipt, and the people who administer these different bits of legislation are cognizant of that fact. There is provision in the legislation for an extension of time, and it is normal to receive an extension of time once you satisfy the administrator that you have not been irresponsible and that you have acted as soon as the information has come, reasonably as soon as the information has come to your attention. So we do intend to approach this reasonably. We need to get cracking on these valuations. We need to bring the tax on. And so we are asking that you support the legislation so that we can move forward. Madam President, those are all the comments I have to make, so I thank you and I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Valuation of Land Act, Chapter 5803, be now read a second time. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Valuation of Land Act, Chapter 5803.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 66-1, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Valuation of Land Act, Chapter 5803, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause.
Honourable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Valuation of Land Act, Chapter 5803, be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This Senate shall now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause. Honourable Senators, may I just indicate that we have amendments circulated on behalf of the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, amendments circulated on behalf of Senator Mahabir. We are awaiting the finalization of amendments to be submitted on behalf of Senators Ram Kisoon, Shri Kisoon, and Senator Mark. I think I'm being told that those amendments are almost ready and we need to have them circulated as well. So I am going to suspend the committee for 15 minutes. So this committee is suspended for 15 minutes.
This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
As much as goods and services, the British Empire facilitated cross-border flows of information and ideas, which ironically helped undermine the empire's hold on its colonies. Among the the influences that seeped across the Atlantic into Trinidad and Tobago was Pan-Africanism, a movement launched in London by Trinidadian Sylvester Williams, creating a network of solidarity among black intellectuals and activists across the British Empire. In the ideals of socialism and Marxism, the West Indian working class found common ground with the poor and the powerless the world over. In Port of Spain, the Trinidad Working Men's Association became the axis around which working class mobilization occurred in the early 1900s, until Captain Arthur Cipriani returned from World War I to organize and focus its energies.
Cipriani came with an out-and-out, as he used to say, an out-and-out socialist program. Abolition of child labor, 8-hour day, workmen compensation, and some form of home rule. These were the clerks.
With the 1929 depression exacerbating socio-economic conditions, workers lost patience with Cipriani's preference for constitutional change and began gravitating towards more militant options. In Port of Spain, they found the Negro Welfare Cultural and Social Association, a grassroots organization led in part by two outstanding working-class women. Elma Francois was a Vincentian who had come to Trinidad as a domestic worker and was quickly drawn to the Working Men's Association until she too lost faith in Cipriani's approach. The other was Christina King, a labor organizer.
In their range of struggles, which included organizing workers on the waterfront, in the ports, in East Port of Spain, supporting Butler in the 1937 riots, in campaigning on the price of condensed milk and other issues. They also campaigned on issues related to the widening of the franchise and for a more democratic constitution.
Author Buccareni marveled at the leadership style he saw at the NWCSA.
When I first met these people, what fascinated me is how the relationship between the men and women in that organization. And in the first place, they refer to everybody by their surnames. Francois was Francois. This other one was Ashby. They never refer to them, so you will never know. When they say Comrade Francois, if you, from the outside, you will never know whether it's a man or a woman you're talking about. And it's the first organization in Trinidad that gave women full leadership.
Ultimately, the variety of ideological platforms helped the cause of representative government by stirring constituencies at every level. By the early 1940s, universal adult suffrage was not only inevitable, it was irresistible.
You're viewing the Parliament Channel 11, also broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
When construction was completed on the Eric Williams Financial Complex in 1986, it was one of the tallest buildings in the English-speaking Caribbean. At the time, it was an outstanding example of modern architecture and also a very physical manifestation of Trinidad and Tobago's economic growth and development. The oil boom was in full swing when architects Anthony C. Lewis and Associates were commissioned to design a monumental financial complex in 1979.
The Eric Williams Financial Complex, I think, is a sort of monumental modern work. I think it represents in many ways the sort of a prominent symbol of independence. You know, it's closely associated with the political and social and economic idealism, I think, that characterized that time.
To be chosen to do this project was of course, a great honor for us, a privilege, in fact, for us to be designing such an important building, both in the country and in the Caribbean. It was the largest project that was going to be built in the Caribbean by local consultants. So it meant actually opening a second office. We had to build a vault to keep the drawings in, because you could imagine if, dare I say, a fire or something occurred in the middle of all of this, all of that work would have been lost.
New ground was broken in the design and construction of Trinidad and Tobago's first skyscraper. However, the project presented many challenges to the architects. The building's dual functions as the central bank and the Ministry of Finance were key factors influencing their design. As two completely independent entities, however, part of the brief was that there be a clear division between the two buildings, with separate electrical and water systems. As the project progressed, the original design had to be adapted and altered.
The design of the buildings, the Twin Towers, wasn't always Twin Towers. It actually started off as the central bank being a 22-story building, and the Ministry of Finance, which was on Independence Square, of a lower building of about 7 or 8 stories. When the governor presented the designs, the original designs in that form, to the Prime Minister of the day, which was Eric Williams, he insisted that no other building should be taller than the government Ministry of Finance building. And that led us to change the design to Twin Towers. So that's the story of how they became Twin Towers.
Another major factor impacting on construction was that the 22-story buildings, which were being built on sandy reclaimed land, had to be earthquake resistant. A strong foundation was critical, and it required a very deep basement to allow the pilings to reach bedrock. Stability in case of an earthquake also came from another aspect of the design.
The other effect of earthquakes design was really to design a building that was very stiff in each direction, and those X crosses that you see, the X braces we call them, that go up the buildings in both directions, and it was north-south and east-west, those keep the building very stiff in both directions, so that in the case of an earthquake, those braces then come into play. They don't actually serve much of a function normally, but it helps to keep the building from twisting in an earthquake.
In designing the Twin Towers, architects also considered the impact such a monumental building would have on the national psyche. The lower podium blocks at the base of the building were designed to allow people to walk around the structure without feeling intimidated. These lower blocks also relate to the smaller buildings that are adjacent.
Another very important aspect of the design was to do with the public space that was formed between these buildings. And to explain that, I mean, it wasn't long after Trinidad became a republic. A republic suggests that everything is open, you know, that the public was then allowed to come into the square to experience the buildings. It wasn't surrounded by a wall or fence as it is today.
The brief for the central bank included an auditorium and concert hall, which was also a civic contribution aimed at enhancing the performing arts in Trinidad and Tobago.
To me, as an architect, having looked at things over time, the auditorium is an interesting space. It's stylistically something that is very much from the 70s. You know, the design driven by geometry and using kind of fairly unconventional forms to use the space or to fashion the spaces function for an auditorium. And I've spoken there a couple of times and attended events, and I think it works very, very well.
The building of the Eric Williams Financial Complex was not without controversy. Constructing a glass building facing the west in the tropics proposed a serious challenge. And differences of opinion regarding materials led to the eventual termination of ACLA as lead architects on the project. They were replaced by the practice Newer Lewis Broadbridge, which completed the project. Opened in 1986, the Eric Williams Financial Complex still stands as one of the finest facilities of its type in the country. The Money Museum was opened to the public in December 2004. Its exhibits tell the story of the history of money from its earliest origins to the function of the central bank today.
I think buildings like this, and particularly this building, had an enormous impact on society. You see it represented on banknotes. I think it represented in many ways an important symbol of modernity and the advancement of society. And I think that people identify in many ways, maybe subconsciously, with those images. They represent in many ways ideas of development, of moving forward, of society advancing.
The Eric Williams Financial Complex is a key part of Port of Spain's modern architectural landscape. The architects understood the significance and impact such a building would have on society, and this is reflected in its design. Today, the Twin Towers are integral to our understanding of what our capital city looks like.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.